Good morning. This is Father Stephen Kelly from St. John's Church in Detroit. We're continuing our series of daily morning meditations where we generally look at one or another lessons that are assigned for morning or evening prayer, what is known as the daily office lectionary. And hooray, today is Sunday. So we gather together for worship to glorify God in that worship and to be nourished in word and sacrament, right? So we hear the word proclaimed and we hear it interpreted. And of course, we also get to receive Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament, which you can only do if you are in person. So in addition to this being the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany, we also are going to have as a secondary commemoration the Feast of Charles, King and Martyr. And you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, Father, I don't remember who this King Charles guy is. Well, let me read you a little bit about King Charles and tell you a little bit about him. This is Charles I, the King of England. He was born in the year 1600 and ascended to the throne. And it was at a time of some political chaos going on in the country of England. As we know, the Reformation was particularly hard, and there was the back and forth of it being a Protestant country and then a Roman Catholic country and all that sort of thing. We had the Elizabethan settlement, which kind of just calmed everything down and kind of trying to find a middle road. In the middle of all that was the figuring out of what position the church, the king had with the church, as well as with the position of the king and the government. The parliament itself was an elected body, as well as the House of Lords. So again, this is English political science stuff as well. In the middle of all of this, we had a very strong king, a man of great faith, named Charles I. And unfortunately, part of the issue that was going on in England was that there were groups of people called the dissenters, the people who were we would call today perhaps Presbyterians, people who did not believe that the Church of England should have its Catholic attributes, which of course God calls the church to have, things like the sacraments, things like the ordained ministry of priests, deacons, and bishops. And so those who were dissenting from such things wanted to have a much more Protestant form of church worship and governance, no prayer book. They didn't want that, as many of the more Protestant churches on the continent were doing. And so it was certainly a tension, and many of those Protestants went on, of course, to be elected to Parliament, and this caused a great scandal between what the authority of the king and the church and the Parliament and the church. And ultimately, we know that that fellow Cranmer, who started this all, that was great. But before long, we have other people who are not the king who have taken over Parliament. And unfortunately, those folks have eventually arrested Charles because of his wanting to dissolve Parliament, because Parliament was overstepping its bounds with the work of the church. And so, in fact, he was arrested, and we hear this. This is from the biography from the Anglican Breviary, the last section. From the time of his arrest, he spent most of his time in prayer and contemplation. On the day of his execution, he gladly made his preparation for death, with the aid of one of the chaplains allowed to him, with whom he first recited the office of the day, and then listened with great devotion to the reading of the Passion according to St. Matthew. Thereafter he received the last sacraments, and by which he was fortified, he went bravely and cheerily to his death. Earl Hyde, the Earl of Clarendon, Edward Hyde, the Earl of Clarendon, who knew him well, wrote of him on this wise: he was, if ever any, the most worthy of the title of honest man. So great a lover of justice was he, that no temptation could dispose him to a wrongful action, except it be so disguised to him that he believed it just. He was the worthiest gentleman, the best master, the best husband, the best father, and the best Christian that the age in which he lived produced. Others have testified that he was marked by a virtue of purity and the practice of prayer that shone wonderfully amidst the temptations and distractions to which he was exposed. He was well known for his strict sobriety in food and clothes, and ever showed a noble insensibility to flattery. All who knew him were impressed with a certain innocence in him, for even his bitter enemies said of him, he is God's silly vassal. At his execution, he affirmed that he was a faithful member of the Catholic Church, which same took place on January 30th, 1649. Afterwards, his body was laid in St. George's Chapel, Windsor, but at the command of his enemies, he was buried without the church's rites for their hatred of him and of the priesthood was not satisfied even when they had accomplished his destruction. And he's venerated because he gave his life for the things which men of such minds were unable to perceive. So, unfortunately, the Protestants in the church decided that they were going to head and destroy him and deny him the final sacrament of the office, the burial of the church. So what they discovered, though, is that these groups, and actually the word that I'm looking for is actually Puritans, right? We know who the Puritans are, right? That this group, what the country of England found, that the only thing worse than having a king who believed in the divine right of kings was to have despotic members like Cromwell, who is the leader of this movement. That the only thing worse than having a divine right of king was to have somebody like Cromwell try to run the country. And eventually Cromwell was deposed, and Charles II, Charles's son, did take the throne. So anyway, it's a little bit of the story about the secondary commemoration today for Sunday. I do hope that we will see you today in church as we celebrate the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany. And may God bless you.